Hello, this is Tom from Tabletop Tap Room and the Star Frontiers Gamer. We're talking Star Frontiers today, and I want to ask a question. Do you like politics? Actually, nobody really likes politics, but we're going to be looking at the politics of Volturnus because the information given to us by TSR, even though it's spread out and disconnected, it's very deep, rich, and varied. So today on the Tap Room, we're doing a deep dive into the politics of Volturnus. Before we get too far, let me just say thanks for watching the video, and don't forget that like, subscribe, and bell icon. Now, Volturnus, it's the bundled module with the Alpha Dawn, Star Frontiers Alpha Dawn game box. Started off the classic 3-module campaign, and so you have a lot of information on just this one planet in the setting. Over 40 critters that are native to the planet, and some not so native because they were introduced by the Sathar or uplifted to sapience by the Eorna or the Mechnons who evolved themselves. So you had 3 modules which all had information developing Volturnus more. You had the Alpha Dawn rulebook, which had a bunch of critters in it that were for Volturnus, for the adventure, for the module, the bundled module. And you had written by Zeb Cook, even though he had no further involvement in Star Frontiers after the way the game was taken and redesigned late in the game. You had his encounter that was set on Lako, which actually had very hard ties back to Volturnus. You had Dragon Magazine, the Volturnus Connection, again, developing more background and more information. And then we got Zebulon's Guide. Zebulon's Guide had timeline information on Volturnus. Some of it good, some of it not so good, but you know, that's the Volturnus timeline. So you had all of this material out there. Oh, and don't let me forget the sample adventure in the Alpha Dawn rulebook set on Volturnus. And so again, that gives us a little bit of insight to what's going on Volturnus at some points. Oh, and geez, I forgot one other thing. There was a Nighthawks encounters, and it was written in, I want to say, Polyhedron magazine, and it had a space station which does not appear anywhere else in the setting, put there by PGC, by Pan-Galactic Corporation, set orbiting Volturnus. But then you had I think it was the Zeracor were attacking Volturnus. And so you had this kind of coalition of privateers, of corporate privateers, the UPF space fleet, squaring off against the Zeracor. And since the station doesn't appear in the astrographic catalog for all the planets and stars for Alpha Dawn, and it doesn't appear in Zebulon's Guide, I always just ruled that, yes, PGC built a station, but it got destroyed by the Zeracor, and they never rebuilt. And that ties into what's going on in Pale and Lako's war. But that might be the topic for another video, another time. But so you have all of this information that develops the setting, and Volturnus really is a highly detailed and in-depth setting to set your games. Just having so much information on various environments on the planet, 40 some odd critters that could be encountered, factions in play. This is a great place to just go ahead and set an adventure. Now, let's talk about the politics of Volturnus, because that's what you need to understand what's going on. And so let's go into that in depth. Now, the Eorna native race of, instead of scales, they have hair, bipedal dinosaur like alien sapient creatures. Love of art and beauty. They suffered the Day of Doom. About 150 of them survived, and so they constitute our first generation. We're going to talk about 3 generations of Eorna. The survivors, they saw the original Eorna civilization at its height. You know, imagine like if Earth was destroyed by aliens and you survived, you and 100 people, but you had the technology to use cryo sleep to stay alive longer and then wake up and then work on a project like the Eorna did. After 900 years and other humans have been born, you would be this this class of people who had saw the Earth that was. You were there, you know, I was there, Gandalf, you know, that thing. And you would remember the destruction, you would remember Earth as it was, and you would so you would have great authority, great moral authority, because you could say, I was there, Gandalf. So that's the first generation, the survivor generation. The next generation we want to talk about is the Eorna that were born after the Day of Doom, when the Sathar came and wiped out the Eorna civilization. And so all they've known is destruction. All they've known is a destroyed world where they hide in secrecy because there is a Sathar obelisk. They're aware of that. They're afraid of that. They're afraid of the Sathar coming back. And so the Children of Doom is the working title. I don't know that they would call themselves that. They might call themselves something else, but we use that for a working title. They've only known destruction. They've only known this great mission that the older generation has adopted, and that's all they've known. And you know, and then rising levels of insanity in their society, and you know, rising levels of mutation, you know, that genetic mutation, because there's too few for them to reproduce, that when they do, they're getting a lot of mutations that are harmful. So that's your second generation. And then the egg ship, the embryos, I think it's actually referred to as embryo, that they're fertilized embryos in one location, and then another says it's an egg ship. Either way, this 50,000 Eorna, they're going to be hatched. They might not be hatched all at once, but they're going to be hatched and creche raised. And so what they know is there's suddenly a Volturnus with new life and new activity, and aliens, you know, corporate aliens and the UPF are involved, and there's new life and stuff's being rebuilt. And there's not this overwhelming threat of the Sathar, because it's presumed the space fleet will be able to handle that. And so they're this new generation filled with hope. Now, because they're going to be creche raised, they're going to bond with their classmates, their creche mates, or whatever, you know, their pod mates, whatever you're going to use for a term to refer to a group of them all being born and raised together. And so you have this new generation. So these are your 3 generations, and they're going to be the building blocks of your 3 political parties for the Eorna. And the important thing here is not to say that all of the survivors are of the one political party. You know, that there can be migration, but by and large, you're going to find the first political party we're going to talk about is dominated by the survivors. Now, some of those survivors might migrate and go, yeah, I like the agenda of this other party. So, don't lock it in, that only the survivors are this party and only the children of doom are this party. So the survivors, the first political party, as I thought about it, was I called them the missionaries. They have a mission. They're pushing a mission. They're still committed to the mission. They have been around for a millennia, because some of them were like adults when the Day of Doom happened. And now here we are 900 years later. So they are a millennia old. They have the perspective of they're old and they're tired. There's going to be a little bit of that. They're just tired and maybe grouchy, get off my lawn, that kind of thing. And they're still going to be committed to the great mission, because it's hard to give up on a project you've worked so hard and long on. And, so they're going to feel like they're entitled to manipulate the primitive races that they uplifted, the Kurabanda, the Almor, the Adescatai, even though that's kind of morally gray. That's a little bit morally suspect, that we're going to use hypnotism and modify their genetics, and because we're still committed to this mission. So you're going to have that, and they're going to be very hardcore, like, and if you deviate from the mission, they're probably going to take that a little bit hard. So they're going to be your very right, hard, the missionaries. The next party is the revivalists, the Volturnus revivalist party. And these are people who have, they suddenly are like, wait, we don't need to do this great mission thing. Forget about that. We can reconstruct Volturnus, Eornan society. And so they're going to be all about rebuilding and strengthening Eorna society, because they've gone from not having any hope for a future, and now they have hope for a future. And so those, I call them the revivalists, and you're going to get I think you'll get a percentage of the children of doom, and you'll also have a small amount of the survivors, and you'll get some of the new generation in that party. And then the final party is kind of a hippie commune party. It's less of a structured party, hardcore party with membership card and conventions where we get together and it's less of that, but it's a lot of that new generation who are interested in exploring life and art and having the opportunity to do that. And they don't care about rebuilding the dead past, which is what the revivalists are trying to do. And they don't care about the great mission, because it's really just not necessary. So they're not concerned about the dead things of the past. They're like, I'm alive and I have life, and I want to explore that, and I want to explore art. And so they're the artist party was the working title I gave for it. So these are your three political parties. And sometimes the revivalists and the missionaries might work together on something because it suits both of their interests. And sometimes the revivalists and the new generation, the artist party, are working together on things. And so it gives you some flavor and text to work with there politically for Eorna society. Now, the sample adventure in the Alpha Dawn rulebook had a shuttle, spaceship take off, and there was a bomb, blew out, and it crash landed, and the PCs are sent to go look for it and look for survivors. Basically, simple little thing, but it presumes a starport. on Volturnus. It presumes a UPF presence on Volturnus. And when we get to Zebulon's Guide, we see that there is a governor, a UPF governor. So I think we need to think of Zebulon, Volturnus in terms of like, Guam or Puerto Rico, not to associate the inhabitants of Puerto Rico or Guam as the primitives of Volturnus, not to do that. I'm not trying to do that, but think of it like those situations where there's a governor appointed by the U.S. I believe appointed by the U.S. I could be wrong, but so you have a governor. And then there's obviously, PGC built a space station there. There's obviously going to be some corporate influence going on. Now, one of the things I have been a fan of is David Weber, science fiction writer. And he wrote, which way? There we go, On Basilisk Station. And you can actually check out On Basilisk Station, read it for free online. If you go to Bain.com, they got a free library, and so you can either download like an ebook, or you can. They actually have it as each chapter is a web page, and so you can actually read it online. I used to do that at work sometimes. Be reading a free book from Bain while I'm supposed to be working, and I'm like, just switch over from the program I was using. Work could be boring. It was a night shift job. But so with on Basilisk Station, you had a situation very much like Volturnus. You had primitives who did not have the technology. They had like real crude muzzle loading rifle technology, that level of it. And so you had a governor that had been appointed to become a protectorate of the Star Kingdom of Ankor. And one of the things in the novel was you had this the corporate enclaves around essentially the starport. And I really liked that idea, and I liked how it played out in the On Basilisk Station novel. And so I think with seeing that you had heinous crimes being done by the pirates who had gone in there, and that there were some hinted at, maybe not sure, maybe not hard proof, that there was some corporate backing for those pirates, that the UPF would, and its governor would say, all right, look, there's no unrestrained corporate involvement on Volturnus. You can have a compound at the corporate enclaves around the starport, and that's it. And you can have operations outside of that, like if you're prospecting in the mountains, you'll go out, but your base is here in the corporate enclaves. And I really like that. And other fans have called that base Mercenary Star Base. And I like that name too. I think that's just a great name. It puts a slight spin on it so that it's not completely all corporate, but calling it Mercenary Starbase and makes it kind of Wild West. Anything goes. It's a great location for the player characters to get involved in things, and to just throw out plot hooks and see what the players pick up, and then go sandbox that stuff. So you're going to have this governor's compound, the corporate enclaves, all surrounding the starport, and it's all collectively called Mercenary Starbase. I just like the name somebody else made up. And then a short distance, 40 kilometers, something like that, some distance away, you'll have the city of Volturnus, which is being rebuilt. And it's being rebuilt with corporations are donating stuff and supplies and machinery to the Eorna, and they're sucking up to the Eorna to try to get more concessions. So they're doing a little bit of that, plus they write it off on their taxes, obviously, right? So Volturnus is getting rebuilt. The revivalists are seeing to that, and you know, Eorna society, now that it's not going to be 150 people, is no longer hiding underground. They need a city, they need a place, and you still have the primitives of Volturnus, and they're going to need to be managed. And so I have envisioned in the on Basilisk Station by David Weber, there was the Native Protective Agency, the it was like a police force, and they were, and so they would go out and try to manage the situation with the natives, and so that I thought would be a great thing. I'm not sure if it's something organized by the Eorna or it's organized by the UPF governor. Either way, I think it should be an organization, and primarily they're about keeping an eye on the corporations, make sure they don't violate things too much. And if like say there was a sudden flood and some Adescatai were trapped, they might come out with helicopters and airlift them out of that perilous situation. They go in and they try to keep the peace because the Adescatai doesn't really like the Curabunda. So, to keep the peace, make sure there's no open warfare, nothing like that going on. And I thought that would be a good thing for the setting. Now, I think you're going to get individuals and contingents of these primitive races coming to Volkos for more training. And I think you're going to see one particular primitive race have individuals showing up at the starport. And this is why, because I once asked the question about which one of the primitive races was the most likely to reach the stars as part of the Great Mission and oppose the Sathar. And I thought it would be the Curabanda because they were into flight. They have those hang gliders. They have those hang gliding hunts of the rollers, elephant-sized critters that eat the shard grass. And so they're into flight. And what's going to happen when the UPF shows up and they see jet helicopters, air cars, glide jets? They see all this wonderful technology of flight, and they're going to be like, that's cool. I want to fly that. So this is the primitive race that's going to be highly motivated to want to engage with the new technology. They want to learn the new technology. They want to engage with UPF society because they're interested in flight. And so you're going to see Curabanda coming to the spaceport, trying to get a job on a starship. It would not be unusual to see a crew that's got their token Curabanda in the crew. And so he's aggressively learning and pushing and learning, to fly and fix equipment. And I think this is a real possibility for the setting. So I would absolutely, and of course, I think in part, you're going to see the missionaries establishing a school to teach and to train the primitives that come to Volkos. And so some of the societies are going to be like, no, we're going to send these, we've chosen these 5 individuals and they're going to go to the school and then they're going to come back and teach us the stuff. And, that kind of model. So this is a very rich and varied environment. One more thing from the Endless Quest books. There was a Volturnus-based Endless Quest book called Villains of Volturnus. And I have chosen that what it represents is it was a holovid produced by Starplay Enterprises in setting to entertain the 12-year-old, 13-year-old market, the middle school, young adults, junior high, market, because of so many of the elements in that story that are just kind of, but if you view it as it's a story that was produced in setting to entertain. Okay, then that's great. But then there are details in there, like the time machine in it. No, the cubics creatures. No, the floating on a leaf, and like it's a glider or something. No, but a lot of details in there are interesting and probably do link to the setting. And one detail is that there was a whole underground city of the Eorna that was abandoned obviously after the Day of Doom. It escaped destruction because it was underground, but these villains that were doing bad stuff found it and were using it in part for a base. Why build a base if you don't have to, right? So it was an underground city, and then that made sense because you have 150 Eorna trying to hold their society together, but they need to go underground because they're afraid of the skies and the potential for the Sathar to show back up and bomb them into nothingness. So that is an interesting idea, and that sets you up for plot hooks, for a dungeon crawl, this whole abandoned city underground. And if there's one, likely more. So this gives you a very rich setting set in Volturnus, set in Zebulon, the planet, the system of Zebulon. I also, while we're here talking about this, we should discuss Ankor, because it's supposedly another inhabitable planet in the Zebulon system, and it's the location of the University of Zebulon. Now, I'm not prepared to just, push away. That doesn't make a lot of sense. A college, a university needs infrastructure. It needs jobs for students. It needs stuff around it. So I like to think of Ankor as it's at the very edge of the inhabitable zone, and it wasn't really inhabitable 900 years ago, but the Eorna, who were a space-based race, they were sending out ships to colonize far reaches, and I think if they had begun the process of terraforming on Ankor, and it's obviously abandoned, but things were introduced to affect the atmosphere, and now 900 years later, that stuff has borne fruit, making it, and maybe there's a whole science department just studying terraforming and just studying this type of topic. So that was part of the impetus for putting the University of Zebulon there. That's how I would handle Ankor and the University of Zebulon. But again, this is all after the Volturnus campaign modules, the 3 modules: Crash on Volturnus, Volturnus Planet of Mystery, and Starspawn of Volturnus. So taking everything together in the setting, you have this very rich interplay fabric for this one setting, for this one planet, that is just powerful and interesting. And the fact that PGC had a station there, but it's no longer there, that's interesting. And maybe there's a crash site where fragments of the station impacted into the planet. That might be an interesting location to go root and dig. And there's always the potential for yet another Star Devil hideout on Volturnus. Apparently the Star Devil himself had a special hideout just for him. So there's always going to be rumors. Star Devil hideout, and so lots of rumors, lots of scuttlebutt going around Mercenary Starport, lots of plot hooks, lots of potential to sandbox Volturnus because there's just so much material there for you to play with, and it's all been handed to us by all these varied game designers at TSR who I don't know if they were talking together. Maybe they were, maybe they had some master plan, maybe they didn't, but they gave us such a rich tapestry that makes Volturnus a great location for you to set adventure in the Star Frontiers universe. Just turn the players loose and throw some plot hooks at them and see what they pick up and pursue, and have a good time. And you don't have to develop much. You can just sandbox it. And you have all of these different factions, corporate factions, Streel and PGC, CDC without a doubt. Maybe Wartech, because they're interested in maybe trying to get their hands on some Eorna, tech, and see if that can be developed, or maybe Southar tech, even though that's illegal. Starlaw says that's illegal for private citizens to have Southar tech. So, but corporations, laws, schmaws, who cares, right? Corporations can do what they want in this setting, and or they can do what they can get away with. I'll say it that way. So you have all these corporations. You're going to have some cadres. You're going to have mercenary outfits. That could be a great potential for your game, your Star Frontiers game. Is the politics of Volturnus gives us such a rich post Volturnus campaign setting that is just awesome, with depth and flavor. This is Tom for Tabletop Taproom. If you like these kind of deep dives into the Star Frontier setting, please leave a comment, and we'll see about doing more. Maybe we might go into that whole what's going on with PGC having a space station in Volturnus, a space station in Truane Star, and yet Streel is headquartered in Truane Star. What is going on with that? And I got thoughts. So this is Tom for Tabletop Taproom and the Star Frontiers Gamer. Thanks for watching the video. Don't forget the like, subscribe, bell icon, and keep on gaming. I'll see you out there. And I hope to see some of you at ShireCon this September. Rumor has it my Star Frontiers game sold out in 5 minutes. All the seats were taken. So I'm very flattered. Thank you all for that. And again, I hope to see you at the gaming table.